Hey Wisecrack, Jared again. We got some pretty encouraging comments from our Suicide Squad autopsy, so we decided to try it again. This time we're diving into the trenches with my latest time suck, Battlefield 1. Just a note, we're not here to tell you whether or not Battlefield is fun, it is, or if it's historically accurate, it's not, or if snipers are ruining the game. They might be. We're here instead, in good Wisecrackian fashion, to delve into the brains of the game. Battlefield 1 does something that most of its predecessors never dared to do, and that was to say something. Now, saying something in a game that's 90% getting taunted by 12-year-olds is difficult, but Battlefield tries nonetheless. But does it succeed in saying something? Well, let's find out. Welcome to this Wisecrack autopsy of Battlefield 1. Spoiler alert for old war movies that you probably should have seen already anyway. But first, some context. Setting Battlefield in the First World War is more meaningful than you might think. Of course, you could say that the creators chose the Great War because they'd run out of modern wars after exhausting World War II, Vietnam, the present day, the future, and you wouldn't be wrong. However, I'd like to argue that Battlefield 1's setting provides really fascinating insights into contemporary politics and how we think about war. If you grew up around the time that I did, your childhood probably meant weeks of hunkering down in front of a TV to avoid the sun and murder Nazis. So many Nazis. This was an era marked by games like Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, and of course, Battlefield 1942. World War II is a media darling for a reason. No matter where you land on the political spectrum, we can all agree who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. And while World War II has been, and will likely continue to be, a hugely popular inspiration for media, it was really popular in the early 2000s. I don't think this is entirely coincidental. Call of Duty released in 2003, the same year the US invaded Iraq. Medal of Honor, which launched in '99, released 8 of their 11 titles in the 4 years following the start of the Iraq War. Battlefield 1942 released in September 2002, the same month George Bush formally called for the ousting of Saddam Hussein, and a year after the US declared a war on terror in response to 9/11. Meanwhile, this era saw hugely popular movies like Saving Private Ryan, which went on to inspire Medal of Honor Allied Assault, Enemy at the Gates, Pearl Harbor, and the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. World War II caters to everyone's needs. For the proponents of the War on Terror and the Iraq War, which was at its onset the vast majority of people, World War II affirms the story of America as savior of the world. We restored freedom to Europe, and we're back to do it again. And for those against America's continued involvement in the Middle East, World War II provided a comforting escape to the good old days when good and evil were as clear as black and white.
There are no good wars, with the following exceptions: the American Revolution, World War II, and the Star Wars trilogy.
So what does any of this have to do with Battlefield 1? World War I has never, in recent memory, been a popular war for media. But all of a sudden, it's featured by a huge franchise. What makes this war resonate with gamers now? Sure, it's in the midst of its centennial, but this is a war where millions didn't even die in the glory of battle, but from disease. A war where there really are no good guys or bad guys. Given our current shift in opinion about American interventionism, we no longer see our wars as a conflict between good and evil, akin to World War II, but as a futile tragedy akin to World War I. This sense of tragedy is bolstered throughout the game by its use of pathos. Pathos is a Greek word for suffering, feeling, emotion, calamity, and for Aristotle is one of the 3 modes of persuasion. For a game that's mostly about its multiplayer, Battlefield finds a lot of ways to inject pathos, and not just the usual sacrifice for the greater good kind either.
All we got out here is blind orders and chance.
For one, instead of infinitely respawning in the prologue, we're told that we're not expected to survive. We're launched into a gray, bleak hellscape, where every time you die, you're shown the name, birth, and death dates of the soldier who just died. Rather than presenting an endless series of faceless deaths, the game gives the player a feeling of pity for the soldiers, and emphasizes the fact that each death is an individual human tragedy. These mini obituaries share something with the original war story, the Iliad, in which Homer provides a mini obituary for almost every character that dies, no matter how minor, in order to make sure the reader doesn't forget the cost of battle. As thinker Jasper Griffin argues, while many stories use the countless insignificant dead as nothing more than a mighty number for the hero to slay, the Iliad draws emotion from the deaths of even the most insignificant characters. In a genre that thrives on hordes of faceless people to kill, Battlefield 1 sets itself apart by forcing us to confront the actual human toll of the war. Even the loading scenes of Operations Mode don't provide a coherent narrative so much as explore the emotional lives of soldiers from both sides, the hollow optimism of Brits fighting the Ottomans.
These Ottoman savages shouldn't be too hard to clear out. You know, I'm half tempted to get stuck into the champagne already.
And American doughboys fighting the Germans.
Tomorrow we'll be going over the top, finally up against the Hun. So far it's felt too much like a holiday.
And the inevitable confrontation with the horrors of war.
At the river, I saw a dozen of us blown to fragments by a shell. The Spirit of Liberty ain't got no protection against those things.
Battlefield sets itself up in a great place, showcasing the hopes, thoughts, and dreams of soldiers during a war fraught with moral ambiguity. In the prologue, we see a Harlem Hellfighter facing off with a German soldier. They both lower their weapons in resignation. This sort of thing happened more than you might realize. You probably heard of the Christmas Truce, where soldiers from opposing armies stopped murdering each other and even exchanged gifts. So, awesome. Battlefield sets itself up to explore this dynamic in its campaign, that unlike World War II, we the audience are a little bit more primed to feel for the opposing side. But Battlefield quickly abandons this in the bulk of the single player. As soon as you move on to another war story, you're faced with actual faceless NPCs for you to mow down. And fair enough. Feeling sad for the enemy doesn't make for very exciting gameplay in a first-person shooter. But if we had our Wisecrack way, it would be really interesting if the theme embodied in the Hellfighter standoff was further developed in the game. We see similar confrontations explored in film. In World War I classics like Pathos of Glory and All Quiet on the Western Front, the bad guy is not the enemy, but the war itself is. In All Quiet on the Western Front, a soldier is met with horrible remorse when he stabs an enemy combatant in a foxhole.
I want to help you.
In Pathos of Glory, a captured German woman is berated by a bunch of rowdy soldiers before they're overtaken by the beauty of her voice.
Die Botschaft bracht, dass sein Herzliebchen im Sterben lag.
The arbitrary division of humanity melts away as the soldiers join her in song. This is one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema. In World War II, however, the bad guy is the bad guy. Saving Private Ryan, for instance, shows us an act of mercy gone wrong. After Upham finds camaraderie with his German enemy, he gets his friends killed. This fact forces Upham to reevaluate his view of war, and of Germans.
Upham!
Despite featuring some stories from the Central Powers in some of the loading scenes, only allies are playable in the campaign. This is a tragedy because the interactivity of video games can provide an unprecedented amount of depth to these kinds of narratives. What do the stories being told in Battlefield look like from the eyes of a German or an Ottoman soldier? Rather than diving into any of the interesting themes the game sets up, such as the world's first industrial war, its morally ambiguous nature, and the human cost of battle, we're instead given generic stories about self-sacrifice and personal growth. Video games are an incredible art form, one with tons of untapped potential. And yeah, I get it, the game is about yelling at people to play the fucking objective. But the creators of Battlefield 1 tried to do something insightful, and for that, we commend them. If you make games and are watching, please do more of this. But if you're a lowly gamer like us looking for a great game that explores the psychological impact and moral ambiguity of war, play Spec Ops: The Line. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.
One last thing though, just because you're on an epic kill streak doesn't mean you need to look like you just got back from the trenches. Au contraire, Dollar Shave Club gets you the shave you love for a fraction of the price. If you're anything like me and years of getting price gouged for razors has left you opting to neglect shaving altogether and go for the disheveled Darwin look, then Dollar Shave Club is here to the rescue. They ship high-quality razors directly to your door at an incredible price. For just $1, you can start your 1-month trial of any of their razors by going to dollarshaveclub.com/wisecrack. And it includes free shipping. I've tried tons of razors in my day to combat chronic neckbeard, and none of them have combined the value and quality like the ones from Dollar Shave Club. It's super easy to order, and you can choose to have them delivered monthly, bi-monthly, however often you need them. And if you're like these hairy bastards that I work with, they need it every day. Plus, it's not just razors they sell. They've got soaps, body washes, face moisturizers, butt wipes, yes, I said butt wipes, and more. So start saving time and money while getting a quality shave by going to dollarshaveclub.com/wisecrack. Thanks to Dollar Shave Club for sponsoring this video. We've been slaving away on a bunch of other videos for y'all, including ones on Archer, The Dark Knight Rises, and more. So if you haven't already, be sure to click here to visit our channel page and subscribe. I gotta go work on some phrasing. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.